Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India projects real GDP growth for financial year 2025-26 at 7.4% against a growth rate of 6.5% during the previous financial year. US President Donald Trump discusses options including military action to take over Greenland. Denmark warns the move will destroy NATO alliance. Prime Minister Narendra Modi gets a New Year greetings call from his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. They reaffirm their shared resolve to fight terrorism with greater determination. And the Warner Brothers Discovery Board rejects rival Paramount's updated takeover bid, continuing to prefer streaming giant Netflix's offer. India on Wednesday projected economic growth of 7.4% in fiscal 25-26, underscoring resilience in Asia's third largest economy even as global growth slows. The data released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation on Wednesday, including the gross domestic products or GDP growth projections as part of the first advanced estimates, will undergo revision through the year. The data also revealed that real gross value added or GVA is expected to expand by 7.3% in FY26, up from 6.4% in the previous financial year. The economy continued to expand at a faster than anticipated rate in July to September, with GDP growth rising to a six-quarter high of 8.2% on the back of near double-digit growth in the services sector. The manufacturing sector too has clocked its fastest pace of expansion in 6 quarters. And India's clean mobility transition is getting a major policy boost. The Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board, along with leading city gas distribution entities, have announced the launch of a landmark study on comparative assessment of vehicular fuels in India's energy transition. The study will be conducted by TERI, which will evaluate EVs, natural gas, petrol and diesel across technical, environmental and economic parameters.
Only thing we can do is, first of all, guide them what is cleaner, how to go about it, what is the advantage, and somewhere also suggest to the government for the policy decision, because ultimately it is not just air pollution. Air pollution is connected to your and my health. So I have to look at the health burden as well. I have to look at the road infrastructure, because if it prevents congestion, then also the emissions are going to reduce.
Air quality in urban centers continues to challenge policymakers and administrators. Now we have CGD bid out across the country, and almost 1.4 lakh crore rupees has been invested by GAIL and other pipeline entities as well as the CGD people. So we are driving that agenda, setting up of more CNG stations.
India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Wednesday met with Prime Minister of Liechtenstein, Rashid Haas. The two leaders discussed strengthening economic and investment ties with a focus on the India-EFTA TEPA to boost investment flows, manufacturing growth and job creation, resulting in mutual prosperity for both nations. They also exchanged views on cooperation in industry-academia linkages. The minister also met the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Liechtenstein, Sabine Mononi. Both discussed opportunities for trade expansion, innovation and clean tech, and explored ways to deepen mutually beneficial ties, especially after the operationalization of the India-EFTA trade deal. Earlier, Piyush Goyal called on hereditary Prince Aloy of Liechtenstein. He handed over a letter from Prime Minister Modi inviting Prince Aloy to attend India AI Impact Summit, which will be held in Delhi in February this year. A memorial lecture remembering Lieutenant General S.K. Sinha was held in Delhi on Wednesday. Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan paid rich tributes to the former Chief Vice Chief of Army Staff. He also spoke on the nature of modern warfare and emphasized the need for scholared officers in the armed forces.
Today, as warfare grows increasingly complex, spanning space, cyber, information, and the cognitive domain, the need for scholar soldiers and thinking journalists is far more than before. Today, even the basic building blocks which I just spoke about, what constitutes a nation state, that are being challenged. The concept of sovereignty, the concept of nation state, that is being challenged. Even diplomacy is under strain. That brings forth the point there's a more need for thinking journalists to be there.
And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. The PM received a telephone call from his Israeli counterpart on Wednesday. The two leaders warmly exchanged New Year greetings and wished the people of both the countries peace and prosperity. They identified shared priorities to further strengthen the India-Israel strategic partnership in the year ahead, guided by shared democratic values, deep mutual trust and a forward-looking vision. They reiterated their zero-tolerance approach towards terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and reaffirmed their commitment to fight this menace. Prime Minister Netanyahu briefed Prime Minister Modi on the implementation of the Gaza peace plan as well. Prime Minister Modi reaffirmed India's consistent support for efforts towards just and durable peace in the region. They also exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. The two leaders agreed to remain in touch. And Israel has begun demining operations along its border with Jordan as part of preparations for constructing a new security barrier aimed at preventing weapons smuggling. According to Israel's defense ministry, around 500 anti-tank mines dating back to the late 1960s have been destroyed in the Jordan Valley. The planned 500-kilometer smart border will include physical fencing, sensors, radars and surveillance systems, with initial work focusing on the Jordan Valley and parts of the occupied West Bank. Israeli officials say the project is intended to counter alleged Iranian-backed weapons smuggled to Palestinian militant groups. Warner Brothers Discovery have said on Wednesday that they've rejected an updated takeover bid from Paramount, urging shareholders to back its agreed deal with Netflix instead. The board said Paramount's offer, despite being amended to include a financing guarantee from Larry Ellison, still carries excessive debt and lacks adequate protections for shareholders. Netflix's nearly $83 billion acquisition agreement remains Warner Brothers Discovery's preferred option, as the high-profile bidding battle draws political attention and is expected to face significant regulatory scrutiny. And let's now get you some more developments from around the world. Crowds gathered in Saint-Tropez, France on Wednesday for the funeral of French cinema icon Brigitte Bardot, who died last month at the age of 91. Her coffin, covered in orange and yellow flowers, was carried into a church. Bardot rose to fame in her 20s, becoming a symbol of 1950s French femininity. The reason for her death has also been revealed as cancer. Japan is celebrating 30 years of its iconic digital pet with a special Tamagotchi exhibition in Tokyo. The virtual pets, a 1990s playground craze, continue to charm nostalgic parents and retro-loving fans. The exhibition also attracted many young visitors eager to experience the 90s nostalgia. Paris turned white on Wednesday as heavy snowfall hit the city on the third day of a rare frosty spell, causing train delays and traffic jams. French weather agency Météo France issued orange warnings for 32 northern departments, while rail operator SNCF announced scheduled disruptions nationwide. Locals call the snowfall extremely rare. And snow also blanketed Brussels on Wednesday, covering the historic Grand Place and prompting a nationwide warning for slippery conditions as up to 5 centimeters fell. Tourist numbers were low as the cold snap disrupted daily life, with authorities warning of further travel disruptions across Europe. And heavy rains triggered widespread flooding and power outages across Kosovo this week, prompting emergency responses nationwide. Drone footage from the town of Kuzmin showed homes and vehicles submerged after intense rainfall over the past 24 hours, as authorities warned conditions could worsen with more heavy rain and snow forecast. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. The ICC T20 World Cup trophy is put on display in a Buddhist stupa in Nepal's Kathmandu.
This week on Defence Dynamics, India is reshaping its military structure with Bhaira formations. What are ramjet-powered artillery shells? And how India's rocket punch gets an emergency boost with Suryastra. As Europe and Israel turn to India for industrial depth, my take explains the why. Watch Defence Dynamics this Wednesday at 8 p.m. IST only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. The White House on Tuesday said that US President Donald Trump is discussing options, including military action to take control of Greenland. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority for Trump to counter Russia and China. The statement further added that President Trump and his team are discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal, and utilizing the US military is always an option. After the US military captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro last weekend, Trump now wants to gain control of Greenland. And this has triggered sharp reactions across Europe, deepening tensions within NATO. Denmark has warned any move to take Greenland by force would mean everything would stop, including NATO and 80 years of close transatlantic security links. Allies, including France and Germany, are working closely on a plan on how to respond should the United States act on its threat to take over Greenland. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot on Wednesday said that he believed the US was committed to NATO, but he suggested European leaders were prepared to strike back against potential US intimidation. Residents fled parts of Aleppo on Wednesday after clashes erupted between Syrian government forces and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, leaving at least 4 people dead and several wounded. Civilians were evacuated to shelters as both sides traded blame for the violence, which comes amid stalled efforts to integrate the US-backed SDF into Syria's national army. The failure to reach an agreement risks further instability and possible regional escalation. Venezuela's interim president Delcy Rodriguez insists that no foreign power is governing her country, even as US President Donald Trump announced Caracas will be swiftly turning over millions of barrels of oil to Washington. A week-long mourning for members of the military killed in the US raid has also been declared. Let's take a look at this report for all the latest updates.
Turmoil and tension is gripping the oil-rich nation of Venezuela after dramatic US military operation that ousted President Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela's interim president Delcy Rodriguez is scrambling to assert control amid mounting domestic resistance, international criticism, and a standoff with the United States. Rodriguez has ordered the activation of an agro-food, industrial and communal high command to protect the nation's productive apparatus, to ensure the flow of essential goods and industrial production remains uninterrupted, and urged for unity.
Venezuelans, let's keep working so that at the end of 2026 we can say that we have fulfilled our duty as a country in national unity, that we Venezuelans have fulfilled our duty in all the productive sectors.
US President Donald Trump was startling candid about his intent regarding the South American country's reserves when he declared that Venezuela will turn over 30 million to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. Venezuela has millions of barrels of oil loaded on tankers in storage tanks that it had been unable to ship due to a blockade on exports by the US since mid December. The blockade was part of rising US pressure on the government of the then Venezuelan President Maduro that culminated in the US forces capturing him last weekend. Oil CEOs are expected to visit the White House as early on Thursday to discuss investments in Venezuela. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has said Canadian oil will remain competitive even if Venezuela boosts output. Thousands of Venezuelans poured into the streets of Caracas, not in celebration but demanding the release of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, sidelined by Washington in the post Maduro transition, warned that Rodriguez was not to be trusted. In its first confirmation of losses, Venezuela published a list of 23 troops killed in the US strikes. 7 days of mourning was declared. Havana separately issued a list of 32 dead Cuban military personnel. Meanwhile, Venezuelans continue crossing into Colombia in search of safety and stability. Bogota has deployed tens of thousands of troops to secure its border, warning that its sovereignty must be defended after threats from Washington of potential military action similar to the one carried out in Caracas. The international community is sharply divided. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke to the foreign ministers of the G7 countries about the importance of freeing Venezuela political prisoners and putting in place the conditions for democracy and planning for elections. Canada is on the same page, but Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said United States has set a terrible and a dangerous precedent in Venezuela. The Venezuelan constitution says that after Maduro is formally declared absent, which could happen after 6 months, elections must then be held within 30 days. The next weeks could determine whether Venezuela stabilizes or spirals deeper into conflict and diplomatic crisis. Bureau Report, DT India.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said on Wednesday that any deployment of UK troops to Ukraine would require approval by Parliament. His comments followed the signing of a declaration of intent with France and Ukraine, outlining potential troop deployment if a peace deal is reached. Starmer said troop numbers would be decided through ongoing military planning and stressed that the UK would not act without full discussions with the United States, which has backed allied efforts to provide security guarantees for Ukraine.
Stood side by side with our European and American allies and President Zelensky at the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris. Mr. Speaker, we made real progress on security guarantees, which are vital for securing a just and lasting peace. Along with President Macron and President Zelensky, we agreed a declaration of intent on the deployment of forces in the event of a peace deal. Mr. Speaker, we will set out the details in a statement at the earliest opportunity. I will keep the House updated as the situation develops, and were troops to be deployed under the declaration signed, I would put that matter to the House for a vote.
Germany has long suffered from high energy prices, and many were angry when the country switched off its last nuclear power plants 3 years ago. But there's also a reason why most of the country and government don't want to turn back the clock. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and joins me from Berlin for more on this. Good evening, Lars. What can you tell us about the debate?
Thanks for having me. Well, I'd like to start by giving some context. German energy prices exploded a few years ago when Russia attacked Ukraine and when Germany, as well as most of the European Union, sanctioned the country and banned Russian gas. It was particularly tricky for Germany because the country had long relied on Russian gas as a relatively cheap energy source. Now prices were suddenly up and there was no quick alternative energy source. Nuclear was on many people's minds, but at the time there were only already 3 power plants left and all of them set to be dismantled. Meanwhile, they have been switched off. Bad timing maybe, but for a very strong reason. Germany is still trying to deal with the leftovers from its nuclear past, searching for final storage for radioactive fuel rods. And they just announced No, not that they found one, but the search will likely go on for decades.
And last, why is the search for final storage so difficult?
Because of what they're looking for. To store these highly radioactive fuel rods, they need a facility that is at least 300 meters below the ground, and it has to be in clay earth or granite or something like that. They're also looking for a location that is topographically secure and won't see any earthquakes or such disasters. The point is to find a location that would be guaranteed safe for 1 million years. Now, at the rate we're going, I don't think we will be here in 1 million years, but that's just me. Now, within Germany, the researchers have now taken 75% of the land off the table. Only a quarter of the country is even theoretically suitable. But of course, you also don't want a larger city nearby, and there's many more factors to be considered. For now, the fuel rods used in the past are in intermediate storage facilities, by the way, that are also extremely secure. But it's easy, all in all, to see how nuclear energy may be comparably cheap, but how it also has a long tail.
Well, certainly quite a bit of a dilemma there for the Germans, and I'm sure for other nations as well. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Lars Holter. Now, this has been a fast-moving story which is just fructified. Well, US forces have seized a Venezuelan oil tanker in North Atlantic after it evaded a partial blockade around Venezuela. US officials say that the tanker is part of a so-called shadow fleet, which has carried oil for countries such as Venezuela, Russia and Iran in violation of US sanctions. The developments are the latest in US President Trump's crackdown on sanctioned oil tankers going to and from Venezuela. Asian Games gold-winning Indian middle distance runner Jinson Johnson announced his retirement after a 15-year career. The 34-year-old athlete from Kerala has not competed since winning a 1500-meter bronze in the 2023 Asian Games in China. His best moment was winning the 1500-meter gold in the 2018 Asian Games in Jakarta. He also won a silver in 800-meter at the same Games. Johnson also won the silver and bronze medals at the Asian Athletics Championships in 2015 and 2017, respectively. The Indian athlete qualified for the men's 800-meter event at the 2016 Olympics but finished 5th, missing out on a place in the semi-finals. His participation at the 2016 Rio Games made him the first Indian male runner to qualify for the 800-meter event at the Olympics since Sriram Singh in 1980. The ICC T20 World Cup trophy has been displayed for public viewing in Kathmandu. The trophy, which is on tour of Nepal, was kept at the Bodh Stupa, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. President of Nepal, Ramchand Paudel, said that the advent of the trophy in Nepal was a proud moment for the country. President Paudel expressed gratitude to the International Cricket Council, noting that the visit has significantly boosted enthusiasm among cricket fans. Rohit Paudel will lead a 15-member Nepal squad in the World Cup, which will be held in India and Sri Lanka next month. Jacob Bethel slammed a maiden Test century as England built a tenuous 119-run lead against Australia to leave the 5th and final Ashes Test on a knife's edge in Sydney. The tourists were 302 runs for the loss of 8 wickets, with Bethel not out 142 and Matthew Potts yet to score at stumps on day 4. 22-year-old Bethel saved the day after Zach Crawley and veteran Joe Root fell cheaply, powering to his 100 in style of 162 balls. But wickets tumbled around him, with Harry Brook and Will Jacks removed in the space of 3 balls by Bo Webster after Bethel reached the landmark. England are desperate for another morale-boosting win after victory in the previous Test at Melbourne. Australia lead 3-1 and have already retained the Ashes. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those who go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. Just scan the QR code on the screen to download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here in DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.